All right. Well, welcome everyone to another exciting episode of Sales Pipeline Radio. My name is Matt Hines. Thank you to those of you who are joining us live on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. We're very excited to have you here in the middle of your workday. We are here every week, Thursday at 11:30 Pacific, 2:30 Eastern. If you are watching this on demand on LinkedIn, or maybe even listening to the audio version on the podcast, thanks so much for checking us out. Thanks for subscribing and downloading this episode. If you like what you hear today, this is but one of many episodes, past, present, and future, almost 300 episodes of Sales Pipeline Radio, in fact, on demand at salespipelineradio.com. Christina, we started this just on a whim. I didn't know what the heck I was talking about. I have a face for radio, and I didn't even think I would work for a podcast. I'm a print journalist by trade. But we've generated a pretty awesome audience to the point where we even have people that sponsor Sales Pipeline Radio. I want to thank very much our friends at Sendoso. In today's digitally saturated hybrid workplace, authentic human connection can oftentimes make all the difference. And you can learn success stories, read some examples and best practices of how companies are delighting and engaging in meaningful connections with lasting impressions. Check out Sendoso. You can go to sendoso.com. Go to sendoso.com/connected, actually, and check out their Connected event coming up on October 13th, 2021. So if you're watching this live or watching this on demand before the middle of October, definitely check out that event. They got some great speakers, some great content. It will not disappoint. So thank you so much to our sponsor, Sendoso. For those of you that have been around this show for a while, you know we feature some of the best and brightest minds in B2B sales and marketing. That includes not only award-winning and successful practitioners, but also some amazing authors and thought leaders in this space. Very excited to have joining us today Christina Del Villar. She is the author of the brand new book, Sway, Implements the Grit Marketing Method to Gain Influence and Drive Corporate Strategy. Christina, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Matt. I'm really excited to be here. This is great.
Well, I'm excited to have you here. I was lucky enough to get to read an advanced copy of this book, and I knew that I wanted to have you on the show and make sure we can do everything we can to get this into the hands of as many marketers as possible. Because I thought that look, I appreciate a book that can take a point and have some best practices. I really appreciate a book that gives you a framework for how to think about doing better marketing. So maybe start with your career has spanned a lot of ground. You've covered a lot of things. I consider you an expert in many, many things. What compelled you to write this book right now?
It's a great question. So for me, I feel very strongly that marketers in general are missing some key components to their own success, right? It's kind of like the cobbler's shoes, that sort of thing. We do not do a good job of marketing ourselves. And what I really wanted to do was help marketing professionals understand that they need to gain influence and trust inside their own organization in order to be really successful. And what that really means is that collaboration, that alignment with the go-to-market strategy, with the overall corporate goals, but more significantly with all of the other organizations and people within that organization. So, we talk a lot about sales and product and customer success. None of us can do it on our own. And for companies to be really successful, we really do need to start working more closely together. And so, to me, it starts with building that trust and influence with those other organizations. And again, it's only going to make the entire organization much more successful, let alone the marketing teams and organizations.
So I want to get into this acronym of GRIT, right? But
Sure.
like the way you describe it in the book, the way you describe it in the promotional materials, I mean, it's not just an acronym, and there's a reason you chose to make the acronym GRIT. Talk a little bit about what GRIT means for you and why it's so important.
Yeah, for me, grit, I think anybody has to have grit if they're in a startup or if they're in some of these large organizations as they are today. But for marketers in particular, I feel like they need to have grit. They need to have moxie. They need to, they show up every day and they work really really hard and they get very little credit. Unfortunately, they're not actually able to show the results, especially as it impacts bottom line. Oftentimes, whether it's from a data standpoint or just being able to sort of articulate the impact and value that they bring. And so, day in, day out, we're there, we're working really hard. I think we'll talk a little bit about revenue and why I feel like marketing should own a revenue number, and why I feel they're like literally the revenue knowledge center of the company. Because every single piece of revenue that comes into a company was touched by marketing in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's, they came to the website, or they went to a program, or sales had some tools that enabled them to sell better. We're helping product define the product better. We're helping customer success keep those customers, especially if it's a B2B or multi-year contract. And so, day in, day out, we are responsible for a lot of what's happening in the company. And yet we don't get a lot of credit for it. We're often the first ones to lose our job, to lose our resources, to lose our budget. And so to me, you just sort of have to have that grit to kind of keep going. And so just coincidentally, I was just in a mood one day when I was writing the book, and came up with the acronym. It fit perfectly. So we just went with it.
We're talking today on Sales Pipeline Radio with Christina Del Villar. She's the author of the new book, Sway. Definitely recommend checking it out. Go to Amazon.com. I'd search for Sway, Sway marketing book. You'll find the book. It's a beautiful shade of blue with a old school magnet on top of it. Incidentally, if you find it on YouTube, if you go to Amazon right now, the recommended audiobooks underneath, I assume this is like, if you like Sway, you'll like these books. Included recommended: Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey and A Promised Land by Barack Obama. So you are in good company
I am in good
immediately.
company. I know, but Barack and
Amazing.
we follow each other on Twitter.
I look forward to the podcast. First it was Barack and Springsteen. I want
Right.
Barack and WR next.
Totally.
Um, all right, so we've talked about GRIT being an acronym. Can you walk us through what those letters mean for you?
Sure, sure. So the G in GRIT stands for go to market strategy, which again, I think is really key, and it's missing in a lot of companies right now. And I feel like marketing sort of already owns that go to market strategy, but it's just not well defined, both the ownership and the go to market strategy in general. So the book walks you through what that means, and how to sort of take ownership of that and influence that. The R stands for what I call RPM: repeatable, predictable, and measurable. And this really looks at your content and the programs, and how you can really be smart and efficient with what you already have there, right? There's no sense in, recreating the wheel. Oftentimes, people will come to you and say, our competitor has this white paper. Why don't we have a white paper? And so just start creating content for the sake of creating content. And what I want to help people understand is you can create as much content as you need to be smart and mindful about it, which kind of goes to I, which is intention or intentional. So I feel like marketers, we often get pulled in many, many different directions. And in order for us to be productive, we need to be really, really focused on our priorities, and what basically the North Stars or the OKRs are. And so we need to be intentional about everything we do. I think it's in the book where I talk about, I had my team take an entire week and write down all of the interruptions that they had that were sort of taking them away from their main projects and campaigns. And on average, they had 200 interruptions a week. And this was for things like, hey, I need a t-shirt. I'm going to see a customer, or, what we need to check on this, or hey, can somebody, build a slide for me, that sort of thing. All these interruptions take away from our productivity, which again, and it's really hard to measure those interruptions, those 200 things we're not really being measured on. And so I just want people, and again, the book is applicable to everybody, salespeople, product, etc. And so you just really need to be intentional about everything that you're doing and how you're spending your time and your money and your resources. And the T stands for tools and technology. I mean, this is key. This helps us define the programs we're going to build. It helps us implement the programs. It helps us measure the programs. And oftentimes, I think this is true for other organizations as well. But for marketing, we don't really own some of these tools that we are dependent on that will help us show our value. And so we need to be more mindful of which programs are being implemented, how they're being implemented, what those workflows look like, and really sort of step up and own some of that. If we're lucky enough to have a sales or marketing ops person, that's amazing. But oftentimes we aren't. And so we rely on other teams and organizations like IT and sales to sort of help manage those tools.
All right,
And
so
again, it's a detriment to us, I think.
So we got G for go to market strategy. We've got R for RPM. We've got I for intention. We've got T for tools and technology. And I feel like you sort of go from sort of strategy, process, implementation, technology there a little bit.
Yep.
We talk a lot about it. And I think, you got tools and technology at the end. I don't know if that was intentional or if that just sort of fit with grit. But I think a lot of companies, like there's a lot of MarTech out there. There's a lot of people buying tools
Yes.
and sometimes people buying tools without having a strategy.
Yeah.
But I think so. Is go to market strategy starting with that and sort of really sort of ending with that and making it circular, not just sort of linear. I think is what's
Right.
making a lot of companies successful right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I think again for, you need to have those tools to implement and to measure, right? And again, it is a bit of a catch 22. It's like we need to understand what our strategy is so that we can make sure that we're implementing the right workflows and have the right tools and technology to do that. But at the end of the day, I think the key piece is that we need to own that technology, right? Not just sort of, help, define what we need and then have somebody else purchase it and implement it. We need to be part of that and iterate on it, because the technology changes and the things that we're looking for change, and sometimes we sort of implement it and forget it, which we need to be a little more involved in that.
Love it. Love it. I sent you a bunch of people on a convoluted trip into Amazon before. I since have this is what happens when you do a live show. Swaythebook.com. A lot easier to remember. It'll take you to a page that has all you need to order a copy of the book and take
Right.
advantage of this. Um, we were talking earlier before we got started that writing a book is a process, right? It's a process
Yes.
to get the book written. It's a process to get
Yeah.
the book published. And so sometimes, like you've got a topic that once you get it published, like ideally it's still relevant, but you started writing it, months, if not a year plus ago. Are there things that you have discovered, things that you have seen in the last year or so, that if you were to rewrite the book right now, that would update what people are going to see in the book today?
It's a great question. I started writing the book prior to COVID, and so I think the main thing, nothing really changed. The framework remains the same. It's a good sort of process and flow. But what I think is a little different, my the key piece is gaining that influence, right? And it's super easy to gain influence and trust if you're sitting in the same room with somebody. It's just much easier. And so I think what has come up with COVID and the pandemic and remote work or hybrid workplaces right now is how do you gain that trust and influence when you're in these remote settings now? And so again, the component of gaining influence and trust remains the same. It's now just you need to be more precise about how you go about doing that, and that it has to do with building those relationships and making sure that you're visible, whether that's on Zoom or via some of the communications that you have, some of the reports that you're potentially pushing out there. But again, I think that's kind of the main piece. Is just that again, it's much easier to have influence if you're face to face with somebody. It's a little more difficult to build that influence and trust if you are doing it virtually.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, you've had a very successful career running marketing for a lot of different organizations. You're now a published author. I was attending a session last week with Jeff Hoffman, who's done some interesting things in his
Yeah.
career. And one of the quotes he gave last week that stood out to me is he said, "Success is a platform for finally doing the things that matter." And you look at your LinkedIn resume, and it's very clear you've been doing things that matter even outside of your career for a very long time. The Ronald McDonald House, Friends of the Observatory. There's a number of things that very clearly are very compelling to you. Talk a little bit about sort of how, kind of how and why and where that inspiration to sort of support these organizations came, and how the hell do you find time for it all?
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's funny. So this goes back when I was a kid, like I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years old. My mom really instilled in both my brother and I that we should be helping as much as we can. And when you're 8, you can't do much, but
Yeah.
it was something that both my brother and I kind of took away from that. And he works for a nonprofit right now, and so for me, it's just really important that I give back. The book is all about giving back. I'm at a point in my career where, I have a lot, I think, to offer people, and I could go, work for a company, but I think I have a lot more to give now, and really help guide, the future marketing professionals that are out there. But I'm passionate about Ronald McDonald House. I'm passionate about space in general. So Griffith Observatory is super meaningful to me, and I really enjoy helping that. I'm also a mentor for Miller Center for Social Impact through Santa Clara University, and so every quarter or so, I work with a different social entrepreneur to help them, especially with their go-to-market strategy. But again, I'm just at a point in my career now where I can take the time to do that, and I'm just really fortunate that I have the experience and I have that time. It's all. I mean, for me, it's really fun.
Yeah.
It's fun to sort of help others out and see what they can accomplish. So
Yeah.
it's good.
Well, thank you for that, and for making that a priority. And I think, the one thing I think if people hear sort of success as a platform for finally doing the things that matter,
Right.
if you, depending on how you hear that, it may imply that you have to wait until you've reached some level of success. And I think it's, like anybody who is listening to this, by definition, the fact that you have found this and are able to listen to this means you are successful, means
Right.
you are winning, and you have opportunity. And I think there's big things and little things with our time, with our resources, with our generosity, just in time and
Yeah.
resources. It's not just writing checks, but
Right.
it's helping those around us.
Yeah, and again, I think for me, again, I can certainly write checks, and I do, but I think it's more meaningful if I'm helping companies build, successful, again, go to market strategies or marketing campaigns. So that's really where I like to focus my time. So, and again, it
Well,
doesn't. Sometimes it takes a lot. I mean, but you can, even if it's like an hour a week, it's significant to those who you're helping.
oh, it's super meaningful. I mean, just a little
Yeah.
bit from you for people that need it. It's very significant to them. So thank you for doing that. I want to thank you for joining us today,
Yeah.
Christina. People can find you at ChristinaDelVR.com, Sway, SWAY, thebook.com. Get a copy of this. It is available in hardback, as well as, is it you narrating the audio version? Do we get your voice throughout this book?
So it will not be me narrating.
All
We've
right.
had a lot of conversation about that, but it will not be me narrating.
All right. Well, either way, make sure you get a copy of this book. Definitely learn more about the grit method and the grit methodology. And thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening and for watching. Thank you to our great friends at Sendoso for being a sponsor of the show. We'll see you back here next week, 11:30 Pacific, 2:30 Eastern on Sales Pipeline Radio.